Hi, welcome to the Survivors Talk. My name is Larry Bernstein. I'm the lead facilitator for the Triangle Survivors of Suicide Support Group in Raleigh, North Carolina. Suicide is an epidemic. It's the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. In the U.S., almost 48,000 die yearly, about 130 every day, almost 6 people every hour. In the world, almost 800,000 people die by suicide yearly. Over 2,000 die by suicide every day, 90 people every hour. Before my 20-year-old son died by suicide, I didn't know anything about suicide or how many lives it touched. Since his death, every conference and workshop I attended shared the latest statistics, and every year the numbers increased. My son Michael was more than some statistic. He was and still is a part of this survivor's heart. Like every survivor knows, the world seems a little less bright, a little less sweet with the death of their loved one. It's estimated that every year, about 250,000 people join the ranks of being a survivor of suicide loss. A survivor is someone who struggles in the aftermath of losing someone they love or cherish to suicide. For most, it's a traumatic loss. They're left behind to endure the most painful and intense grief that's unique to a loss by suicide. For 7 years, the Triangle Survivors of Suicide Group has organized and sponsored the Survivors Walk, which raised over $93,000. All proceeds were donated to local community organizations which support suicide awareness and prevention. Organizations like the nonprofit Hopeline, which helps save lives every day. The pandemic shut us down, but it cannot shut down our purpose or our passion. And with the help of 919 Marketing, we've worked to create the Survivors Talk. Our program consists of survivors sharing their stories and their journey. In their unique journeys, you may hear a piece of your own story or a friend's story. Hearing them today may help you find some renewed strength to deal with your own healing. That's my wish for you. So settle into a comfortable chair, keep some tissues handy, take a deep breath, and listen with your heart to our Survivors Talk.
Hi, my name is Shaolin. I'm a survivor of suicide loss. I lost my older sister Priya to suicide on January 10th, 2016. She was 24 years old. She struggled with anxiety, OCD, and depression and had had a history of suicide attempts before. When she first passed away, I remember feeling betrayed because she wouldn't let me help her when she was struggling, and I felt abandoned that she left me, her only sibling, behind. It was difficult grappling with these feelings and trying to get used to the idea of living in a world without her. I had felt completely alone and paralyzed. What had helped me the most over the years was the continued love and support from my parents, and also continuing to work towards my goals that I had before she passed away, like graduating college, which I'll finally be doing this year. I've also traveled a bit since then, and going out and making new memories has helped me realize that it's okay to be living in a world without her. It may sound trite, but the passing of time has really helped me a lot. And even though she's gone now, I still miss her and love her all the same. I've just been learning the last 5 years how to love my big sister now that she's not here anymore. And I try to carry her memory with me every day. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Karen Peliquin, and I am a survivor of suicide. I lost my brother, David, to suicide on December 28, 2016. He was 38 years old. This year, I actually turned 39, so it's hard to believe that I have out-aged my brother. He was older by 4 years. We had a typical sibling relationship where I wanted to be just like him and follow him around wherever he went as children. With the 4 years, we were always kind of in different parts of our lives. I remember when he went to college, I missed him terribly as I was home with my family. He went to NC State University, and I remember when I went to college, he was always the first person I called for any reason, whether I was in trouble or confused or happy, just wanting to share experiences. He was always my number one person that I'd go to. I had never experienced suicide personally. I had never experienced suicidal thoughts. I had never really known of people who died by suicide, and I had never really thought about how others feel when they lose a loved one to suicide. So this was very new to me. And I feel like in those beginning days, some of my thoughts were almost like my brother's thoughts. I sometimes was thinking that the letter he wrote, I could have written it, because my thoughts became so depressed and full of anxiety. And I think about, as a child, everything I did, I looked up to my brother. And it was hard to change that state of mind. For 36 of my years, David was the end all be all. He was someone I looked up to. And when he died by suicide, it crushed me. It broke my heart in ways that I didn't think could ever be broken. And I wish that he could have gotten the help that he needed. I wish that there was not such a stigma talking about feeling low and sad and feeling suicidal. I wish so badly that he could have gotten the help that he needed. And I wish he had the strength to ask for it, because maybe if he did, he'd still be there. He had nothing but support from his family and love. And knowing what I know now, I know that we could have been there tremendously for him. And I also know what I know now as a survivor, that part of my recovery of helping myself with my depression, anxiety, and my grief, which has been a roller coaster, the most important thing that I've had that helped me was attending Survivors of Suicide group. Whenever I go there, I feel like I can talk about my grief. I can listen to grief. And sometimes I can choose to speak. Sometimes I can choose to just listen. And I always come out of there knowing that I helped myself and I feel better. Even on those horribly tough nights that I feel like I take others' grief home, I know that by me sitting with my grief and touching the pain, that's helping me and helps me process my grief. The best thing I think about being with other survivors, especially going to a group setting, is that you get to come as you are. You can come if you're sad, if you're happy, or if you're mad, or you're angry, or you're confused, or you just can't get through another day. You get to come however you are, wear whatever you are, be whatever mood you're in. And there's not many places out there that you get to do that. And when you go to group, you're allowed, you're welcomed. All of those feelings are there. The questioning, the crying, the just feeling overwhelmed or underwhelmed with life. And when you're with other survivors, that's what makes you feel whole again. To me, that's been the most important part. In the early days, or even now, sometimes it's difficult for me to pick up a book about grief or read articles, because if I'm not in that right mindset, I can't pay attention to it. I can't understand what they're saying. But when I go to group, I'm able to concentrate. I listen. I know everyone's story. I know the little details that they shared. I know because my heart is listening, my ears are listening, my eyes are watching. And I can't say that I can do the same when it comes to outside settings or reading or watching TV. I kind of trail off. But when I'm with other survivors, I know that I'm not alone, and I'm thankful that I can be a listening ear for them as well. And so to me personally, just being with other survivors has been the most helpful part. And it always baffles me to realize the power of just a nod of the head of someone that's like, I get it. I understand, even if it's like what I consider like some of the most craziest thoughts that I've ever had of how I feel or why do I feel that way. And someone nods their head and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is normal. This is okay.
My name is David Klingler, and I'm a survivor of suicide loss. I'm 29 years old. I lost my brother Mitchell to suicide February 13th, 2016. He was 27 at the time. Mitchell struggled with depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, drug addiction, and alcoholism. But despite all that, he guided and encouraged a lot of people in his life, including me, obviously, in profound ways. When I first learned Mitchell was gone, I knew right away my life was flipped upside down. I felt devastation and pressure to push for his legacy, and I felt like there would be a hole in my heart that would never be filled again. I've missed my brother every day since then, and I still cry about it sometimes 5 years later. But I've made progress. The most important things that have helped me have been, community that could understand. That's the number one thing, but also, actively touching the pain, as we call it sometimes. I talk about the loss. I do creative expression, whether that's, music or writing about it, or writing music about it, or making games, because games is how I had bonded with my brother. So that's something big I've really stepped into, is like honoring him in that, in how I create things, and then pressing really deeply into faith to kind of understand where everything fits, and I mean, I'm standing now, like survivors say, I'm standing now, but that doesn't mean the missing's ever going to go away. Like I'm always going to miss my brother.
Hello, my name is Matt Samus, and I'm a survivor of suicide loss. On September 16th, 2003, I lost my father to suicide. On December 11th, 2007, I lost my mother to suicide. I can remember both days still clearly as to when I got the calls that I had lost my parents. I was living in North Carolina at the time my father passed away. Myself and my family were in total shock. We were very surprised to have received that news. Looking back on that, I think there were maybe a few warning signs that we should have seen. His withdrawal from friends and families were a strong point, that something we thought we should have identified while he was going through his troubles. Looking back on my mother's loss, she followed the same path. Both my parents were very successful in what they did. We thought for the most part they were happy and had come to peace with everything. Little did we know that they would make the decision to take their own life. I think that's one of the most difficult things that I had to overcome, was understanding how or why my mother and father thought that was the right decision to make. I had to find a way to make peace with myself and forgive myself for anything that I felt held responsible for my parents' decision. In doing so, I was able to forgive myself and forgive them, and that's made all the difference in the world. I wouldn't have been able to do that without an organization like Triangle SOS. The support group was one of the most amazing things that could have ever happened to me in my life. I think we're brought up and we're raised to be strong, not show emotion, not cry when we need to. But regardless of what your beliefs are, the human body is an amazing thing. And we've been given those things for that very reason. I found myself in a very dark place after my mother passed away. A very, very dark place where suicide had actually become an option for me. I had to reach out and I found help. That is when I was introduced to Triangle SOS. Attending the meetings allowed me to share the emotions that I was feeling. The emotions that sometimes I was embarrassed to express with friends and family. I couldn't understand why sometimes I would feel hatred for my parents. The dismay that I felt, and that would lead to guilt. And I would feel guilty for those feelings. We as survivors experience something that I don't think everybody else can understand. The emotional roller coaster that we face is something that we don't have to do alone. I can say from my experience that it helped tremendously to be able to speak about those things and have people next to me who understood those exact feelings that I shared, who I didn't have to worry about possibly resenting me for those feelings. I didn't have to worry about how expressing those feelings they would feel about those, because they understood me and they understood the struggles that I was facing. As I progressed, I was able to help volunteer a little bit more. Being a part of that tremendously helped. Every time I share my experience, it seems to help a little bit more, and it's not as difficult as it has been in the past. Being a part of walks, being a part of the groups, being a part of conferences lets me know that I'm not alone. It helps me understand that we can get through this. When I was able to start getting through some of those motions, I started to get my life together. I started working on small goals. Goals getting back into school, accomplishing small tasks, getting things just back to as normal as life could be. I can say I'm still affected on anniversaries. I'm still affected on birthdays. But it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. At one time in my life, I was scared to death to have children. From all the thoughts and all the studies and anything you read of whether or not having depression and suicide, if it's hereditary or if it's passed on. But that was not the way to live my life. I've been very fortunate. I've been blessed with twin girls who'll be turning 5 in August and a son who just turned 1. And I wouldn't have changed a thing in the world right now. I know in my heart, my mother and my father did what they thought was the best at that time, for whatever reason that is. And I know they wanted me to be happy. And I know somewhere out there, they're happy that I'm happy.
Hello, my name is Marion Klingler, and I am a suicide loss survivor. My 27-year-old son, Mitchell, overdosed and drowned in frigid waters on February 13th, 2016, the day before my Valentine's birthday. Mitchell was my firstborn son and had blonde hair and deep blue eyes. He had a brilliant and curious mind, which had led him to pursue education for a career in medicine. He enjoyed playing clarinet in high school and college band. He loved playing video games and disc golf, folding origami, fishing, hiking, snowboarding, scuba diving, driving, learning about computer technology, and cooking. He was sensitive, compassionate, loyal, protective, and devoted to all. For all the good he was able to experience and share with the world, Mitchell suffered for many years from debilitating depression and drug addiction. Many of my early memories of his death are still quite vivid, even after 5 years. It was a bright, sunny, windy, and cold Saturday morning. Mitchell's fiancée, Jess, sent me a text saying Mitchell had been found unconscious in a pond, and the police were taking her to the hospital following the ambulance. When I first saw Mitchell, his beautiful blue eyes were open, and for a split second I thought, could he still be alive? But no, the doctor said he'd never had a patient come in with such a low body temperature. I was so grateful for the hospital staff, EMTs, police officers, and clergy who attended to Mitchell and his loved ones. It was a traumatic experience for everyone involved. I remember trembling uncontrollably. I couldn't sleep in the dark, if I could sleep at all. It was important to me that his funeral be a celebration of Mitchell's life, light and joyous music, rather than the memory of his painful struggles and tragic death. He would have been so surprised to see the church overflowing on a Wednesday afternoon. So many of his friends said Mitchell was the one they always came to for guidance and support. If only he had reached out for their help. The most difficult, painful parts were cleaning out and selling Mitchell's car, going through his clothes and shoes to give away, visiting the pond where he died, being executor of his estate, receiving his autopsy report, which said no physical abnormalities, visiting his grave beside my father's, avoiding news, violent movies, and shows that make me feel too much, and also losing Jess to an overdose suicide on September 9th of 2016, and having to go through the storage unit of their belongings. What has helped me the most is sharing my story and hearing how others have learned to survive and thrive with strength and hope. Attending Nar-Anon and Al-Anon meetings for years before Mitchell's and Jess's deaths helped me better understand and prepare. Attending the Survivors of Suicide group has made it clear that it is important to remember we are not alone. In fact, other survivors have a unique understanding and compassion. Of course, I am most fortunate to have the constant love and support from my family, who have helped sustain me, especially these past few years. In October 2019, we moved to a small farm in the NC Mountains to get away from so many terrible reminders and to make a fresh start. I still feel extremely fragile and need time and space to continue healing. This is a peaceful, idyllic setting full of beautiful colors, trees, flowers, and birds. I will lift up mine eyes into the hills from whence cometh my help. Evidence of the loss of Mitchell and Jess is everywhere. Often when driving in the car or shopping in a store, I will cry when I hear certain songs that trigger memories. And it is usually spontaneous boohooing. Washington Irving said, "There is a sacredness in tears. Tears are messengers of overwhelming grief, of deep contrition, and of unspeakable love." Vincent van Gogh's last words were, "La tristesse durera toujours." Sadness will last forever. I believe this is true. However, my memories can also be a soothing comfort and solace for the rest of my life.
My name is Gita Balagopal, and I lost my daughter Priya to suicide on January 10th, 2016. She was 24 years old. When she was about 15, I found out that she had OCD. I didn't take it seriously. I told her that she has too much time on her hands disorder and to get busy. I really thought she was bored. It was the summer and she was out of school. But 2 years later, I found out that it was much more serious and that she had thoughts of suicide, anxiety, depression, and borderline personality disorder. What has helped me the most is talking with other survivors. And what has been most painful is not being able to hold her, hug her, touch her, watch her grow into everything that she could be and live up to her potential. It's also extremely painful to see my youngest daughter navigate life and grief without her big sister and only sibling. All three of us, my husband, my daughter, and myself, have been doing our best every day just to survive. And we have some really terrible days and some good days. It has been more than 5 years now. And like I said earlier, the thing that has helped the most is actually attending the Triangle Survivors of Suicide support group meetings and talking to the other survivors, some of whom have been on this grief journey much longer than we have, and watching and listening to them and learning from them how they have been coping and learning about their experiences, what they do, what has helped them, what has not helped them. That has given me hope that maybe I too can survive this horrible loss. I've also learned that it's okay to feel whatever that is that you feel. And when you have really sad days and you want to cry, just cry. Just cry my heart out. And when I laugh, and there has been days I laugh a lot, I've learned not to be guilty, not to feel guilty that I'm happy and Priya is not here. Because if I just wallow in grief, I'm not doing anybody a favor. It's not going to bring her back. Plus, I'm going to make myself so miserable, and it's not fair to me or other members of my family. What has also helped is continuing Priya's advocacy. She was such a huge advocate of mental health, and she was very passionate about mental health and helping others with depression. She was a volunteer for a suicide hotline. She used to march on Moral Mondays, and she was co-president of Active Minds in Carolina for 2 years. And if someone told her they were depressed, she would actually walk them to the dean's office. So I now participate in walks with my survivor support group, with NAMI. I've also shared her story with anybody that is willing to listen. because sharing our stories helps to destigmatize suicide. Suicide loss is it's a horrible thing that can happen to you. It's actually one of the worst things that can happen to anyone. As a parent, you have so many dreams and hopes for your child. And when that child dies by suicide, you're just left with a huge hole in your heart that nothing or no one can fill, no matter how hard you try and others try. You just have to navigate it in your own way. Thank you for letting me share my story.
My name is Chinawatoaru, and I'm a suicide survivor. I lost my son, Chinawatoaru, to suicide on February 28, 2020. Kevin is 33 years old when he passed. His birthday is June 9, 1986. The most difficult or painful part of my experience is not having to see Kevin ever again. Not being able to get a hug from him, not being able to hear his voice saying, "I'm okay, Mom. Don't worry about me, Mom. I'm doing well." It's very difficult to go about my day on a daily basis, knowing that I will never, ever see Kevin in this life again. I find the strength to go on because what are my choices? I keep thinking that maybe if I had done one more thing, I could have helped him. Kevin struggled with mental illness for a long time, 12 years that we knew of. And he always assured us that he's doing well. He's doing what he needed to do. It's painful, it's difficult, it's just brutal some days that I have to repeat this reality in my head every day, getting out of bed, that Kevin is not here. And sometimes I don't want to accept that painful fact or reality. I fight with acceptance and denial so many days in this past 14 months. It was just last week, 14 months, that it does feel surreal. What has helped me most? A few things. One, being in group really, really helped me. In the beginning, I did a lot of one-on-one therapy until I was trying to figure out the right group. I'm in two groups that really helped. The one is SOS, Survivors of Suicide, because I find myself in a lot of people's stories, and I say golden nuggets to help me face each day, or face my challenges, or intrusive images, or my ruminating thoughts, what I could have or should have done to help my son. it's like I look forward when is my next meeting with group. In the beginning when I joined, I just wanted to be there and listen to other people's stories while they listen to mine, and just to find out how are they coping with this on a daily basis, how are they living, what are they doing about self-care, the ruminating thoughts, the images, the should-haves and could-haves. And I find strength in everyone's story that I take from, and I go live my day the best that I knew how. I oftentimes say that in the first few months after Kevin's death, it was like walking through mud. And it gets a little easier now that it's 14 months. It's gotten a little easier, but I still think that some days I'm trudging mud. But I'm hoping, I have hope from all these groups that I'm in, that eventually that I am going to get to a place where I can find equanimity, and live a life where I can grieve him fully and love him fully. But it's just a rough journey, and I would definitely say groups have been my saving grace. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Grace Fields, and I am a suicide survivor. I lost my partner to suicide in 2019 on October 21st. He was 24 and his name was Victor Ray. The person I lost struggled a lot with previous years of trauma, mental health. He had multiple mental health disorders, some diagnosed, some undiagnosed. He was unmedicated when I was with him, and he struggled very openly with me. If you knew him personally and were really close to him, you may know more about the struggles, but other people who worked with him always were talking about how he was such a light and he was so fun, and it didn't show on the surface. But he definitely struggled a lot with his mental health and with his past, which was a big factor. When my early memories, when I learned about his suicide, those are something that still stick with me to this day, that I still struggle with. I was actually the one that found him after he completed his suicide. And, you know, those memories, those images will always be a part of my life, will always be burned in my head. I'll never forget them. I actually had been there multiple times previously when he was in crisis and was contemplating a suicide attempt or was attempting to take his life. And the last time I just wasn't able to be there. I was at work and he didn't reach out to me. I didn't find out until I got off work between breaks. I remember getting a lot of messages from his mother, his grandmother, who I'd never met, calling me from a number I didn't know. And when I went on break, I did find him. So that has definitely been one of the biggest things I've struggled with everything, is just the images, the PTSD, all of that is something personally that I have had to deal with that's been really difficult. Also, you know, one of the hardest things is just losing a person that you weren't prepared to lose. With suicide, a lot of the times it's so unexpected. Victor was 24. I mean, he was young. There was so much life left for him and for us that we had plans for. And then just to have all of that gone in one instant, one day, it's a big shock. And it is a lot to adjust to. I tell people that it's like, it's all the love that you have inside your heart for one person, and then all of a sudden it has nowhere to go because they're not there. And that is a really heavy burden, a really heavy feeling to deal with. One other thing that has been really difficult for me to deal with is the loss of people who knew Victor and who were close to him. I've noticed, I've talked to multiple survivors who were in similar situations to me, who lost their partner, whether husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, and a lot of the times, a lot of the blame from that is put onto the partner because the family is grieving and they don't know where to direct their grief. And it's been really difficult for me because not only did I lose Victor, I lost any connection to family that knew him and was able to share stories. You know, at first they were really close. We shared stories, we talked about him, and it was great. But as time went on, they distanced themselves, and it's difficult to be blamed for the loss of someone that you miss so much and that you wanted to see thriving. So that's a really difficult thing that I've had to deal with. But some of the things that have helped me are support groups for sure. I was very lost when I first lost Victor. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anyone in my life who had gone through something like that. And so I felt that I was dealing with most of it on my own. I didn't know where to turn. I moved about 3 months after it happened to go to school. And while I was up here, I found a suicide survivor support group that I tried out. And I also found a couple online support groups on Facebook and other platforms that were more specified. And one of the groups that I joined was meant for women who had lost their partners. And it was so helpful just to be able to read other people's stories and just to post random things that I was feeling and thinking, and having people validate that and be like, you know, we hear you and we feel that and we sympathize for you, and we want to see you being cared for and doing better. So finding that support, finding other people who have stories similar to me or just other stories with suicide has been such a big, important factor for me. Also, just the ability to have people in my life that I can trust to go to when I'm feeling the heavy burden of grief. I lost a lot of my close friends because of this right after. I don't know why, but I found other people who were there for me and who were willing to support me. And even if it's not just talking about it directly, being able to go to them and say, hey, I'm not feeling great right now. Let's do something fun, or let's just talk. It's really nice. Being able to write, being able to express that is something that's been really important for me in my journey. So that is my story. I hope that it sheds a little bit of light on suicide. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yvonne Johnson. I'm a mom and a mental health advocate, and I'm a suicide survivor. My life was forever changed when I lost my daughter and only child, Michelle, to suicide on June 6, 2018 at the age of 43. Michelle struggled with a diagnosis of bipolar with severe depression from the age of 17 until her untimely death at 43. She suffered daily with endless pain because of her psychological challenges. She was diligent in seeking and trying the right course of treatments, coupled with her tenacious spirit and determination to beat this insidious disease. She could live a life without constant battle of psychological challenges that robbed her of that peace. Always medication compliant, she kept therapy appointments. She elected to do 12 ECT electroconvulsive therapy sessions. She co-led NAMI peer-to-peer groups. My earliest memories when I learned that Michelle was having thoughts of harming herself was shocking, frightening, and that I, as we knew it, would never be the same. Life would never be the same. As a mom, I wanted to protect and do whatever it was going to take to get her better and for those thoughts to go away and to lead a normal, healthy life. The most difficult part and painful part of this experience was seeing Michelle suffer daily and not be able to get the help she needed so desperately. The mental health system is so fragmented and nothing but a revolving door. Not being able to save Michelle one more time from taking her life will forever be a painful memory. You always think that you'll be able to get there in time to save your loved ones again from the ravages of their illnesses. As in life and in death, Michelle will forever be my hero. What happened and what helped me the most after Michelle's death was the wholehearted support and love from my family, from my friends, and from my church. I also began legislative advocacy efforts with one of my best friends, a mom and mental health advocate herself, Cindy Wheeler. What helped me the most after Michelle's death also was taking part in NAMI and Foundation of Hope walks, attending survivors of suicide meetings, leading NAMI family-to-family classes, and assisting Alliance and NAMI with CIT training for law enforcement. All of these combined have helped me get through the darkest, saddest times in my life. I'll carry on Michelle's legacy through advocacy for mental health, and I know in my heart that there's a greater purpose in this pain that I feel every single day of my life.
Hello, my name is James Weeks Jr. I'm a suicide survivor. I lost 2 children to suicide. I lost my only daughter and youngest child to suicide on September 22nd, 2011. Ariel was 22 years old at the time. On May 6, 2013, my oldest son found his brother, Jared, dead in his mother's home. Jared was 30 years at the time. My daughter, Ariel, was diagnosed with mental health issues. We actually had hospitalized her at 2 of the local hospitals here in the Triangle area, and she spent a total of 3 weeks at the psychiatric hospital. 2 weeks after she was released from the psychiatric hospital, she took her life. My son Jared was never identified with a psychiatric disorder before his death. However, after he passed, we quickly realized that he had been dealing with bipolar depression. My early memories when I learned about my daughter's suicide was I immediately fell on the floor. I received the news via a phone call that she had taken her life, and I can see myself right now falling to the floor in the fetal position. I struggled with depression. I struggled with just an angst that just didn't seem to go away. My memories of my son's suicide were completely different. Immediately, I locked into the feeling of anger, and that stayed a very long time with me. Typically, I'm not one to hold on to anger, so this was a very, very difficult feeling for me, even more difficult than dealing with my daughter's suicide 20 months earlier. The most difficult or painful part of my experiences were just the utter grief at getting the news that they had taken their lives, the sense of isolation in the immediate aftermath of their suicides, and a feeling of loss. Those would be my most difficult, painful experiences during that time. I remember we had my daughter's funeral on October 2nd, 2011. That was a Saturday, and the following Monday, I felt completely lost. And I went on the internet and searched for a support group, and I found the Survivors of Suicide support group here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I must say, that was the one single thing that helped me the most, especially with the suicide of my first child. Because not only being in a group with people who had lost children and other types of relatives and loved ones, it also introduced me to tools that helped me. I remember especially a book by Iris Bolton, which when I read really gave me hope that I could indeed navigate through this horrible nightmare that I was experiencing. I also found 25 helpful hints that Iris Bolton had written when she lost her son many, many years ago, and that helped me a lot. I'm a person of faith, so meditations and reading meditations connected to the death of a child, meditations connected to suicide also helped me a whole lot. So those were the two things I think that helped me a lot. My family was always there, but for the most part, they didn't know what to do because this experience was very, very horrendous.
Hello again. I'm so grateful to our survivors who spoke today for their courage to share with us some of the difficulties in the aftermath of their painful loss. I'm also very grateful to have our next speaker to close out our program. She's an international lecturer and consultant who offers hope to people bereaved by death, loss, and suicide. She's Director Emeritus of the Link Counseling Center in Atlanta, Georgia, where she served as a full-time director for 36 years. She's an author of 3 books on loss and grief. She's credited with creating survivor support groups in the 1970s. She's an inspiration and one of the most spiritual people I know. And most importantly, she's a survivor. Her 20-year-old son, Mitch, took his own life in 1977. It's my pleasure to introduce Iris Bolton.
Hello, my name is Iris Bolton, and I'm a suicide loss survivor. My son, Mitch, was 20 years old when he took his own life. He was a beautiful young man who had some depression issues that we didn't even know about. He was a good actor. He was 20 years old, and he lived on his own. He would come back and stay with us occasionally, but one of the problems, I think, was that he had 4 girlfriends, and he promised to marry 3 of them. So I think he got himself in a bind, in a box he didn't know how to get out of. But he was a charmer. He was a good actor, and I think because of that, we didn't know he was even depressed. He was the life of the party. He was charming, a ladies' man, obviously, and he seemed to love life. But he made a choice about his life that I don't understand to this day. But I've studied enough. I went back to Emory University and majored in suicidology. That gave me no answers. But I found out that it was a combination of things. It wasn't just one issue or one thing that caused his death. I believe it was a combination that accumulated, and he never dealt with it. So we were stunned by what happened. We had 3 other sons. Mitch was our second born. And on February 19th, 1977, he shot himself in his bedroom of our home. He'd been spending the night there. And my husband went in after a phone call. We got 2 phone calls, one from his girlfriend, who apparently was talking to him on the phone when he ended his life. So she called back and said, something has happened to Mitch, please go check on him. So Jack did, and found him having shot himself. So he called the police immediately, of course, and they came immediately. I had gone to a meeting, to some political meeting or some sort of something in the city to help the community in some way. I don't even remember now what it was, but I'd gone to this early morning meeting on this Saturday morning. So I get a phone call, go to the hospital. And I said, who? And they said, Mitch. I said, motorcycle? Because he had a motorcycle that we were worried about it, and he was too, actually. And they said, no, worse. So my husband, my son, actually, let's see, who was it? I guess by that time Jack had gotten home. So a neighbor drove me. That was how it happened. A neighbor drove me to the hospital. And I was greeted there by Jack, my husband, who said, it's too late, he's gone. And I said, what do you mean he's gone? And he said, no, he's gone, he's died. So I said, well, I have to see him. And the loving men in my family wanted me not to go in the hospital. I think it was protection. I think they wanted me to not see the horror. And I had to, I guess, to believe it, I had to. So I went down the hall in the emergency room, and they're pulling me back. And I said, I will go see him. And I found the door. I don't know whether it was instinct or what, but I went in the room, and there he was, a sheet covering him. And the nurse and the doctor said, he's gone. It's too late. I said, but he's breathing. His chest was rising and falling. And they said, that's to keep him alive so his kidneys can be donated. I said, yes, of course. But he's alive. I couldn't get it. Well, I did get it eventually. They said, you have to leave now. We want to give his kidneys to someone. I said, yes, of course. I need his bracelet. So I took his bracelet off. We went home, and our home was filled with loving family, neighbors, friends. And I was stunned. I didn't know what to believe, because you have to remember, this was 1977. Nobody that I knew had had this happen before us. So it was like, what do you mean suicide? What does that mean? It was a foreign word to us and to most of us. I had to learn what that meant. And that meant that somebody takes their own life. Somebody ends their own life by choice. And so that was a huge learning, I would say, to really believe that this is what happened. So I didn't think I could live through this. The pain was so enormous. And back then, the embarrassment, I didn't know another soul that this had happened to. I felt there was a big red sign on our home, on my car when I would drive down the street, my son ended his life. Well, that wasn't true, but that's what I felt. I felt very alone. I think one of the hardest things was my children. I have 3 other sons, and at that time, they were in school. And The teachers were wonderful, tried to help them understand it was nobody's fault. Mitch made this choice himself. If it was their choice or the parents' choice, our choice, he'd be alive today. So they really worked with him beautifully because I was kind of out of it. And Jack was wonderful, greeting people at the door, bringing people in. Everybody we knew came to see us. Our family flew in. And I think that the best part was the comfort we got from friends and neighbors and family. That was quite remarkable, how everybody just showed up. And most people didn't know what to say, but they would say, "I'm sorry." And that was enough. That was really all we needed. So as time went on, I was in therapy and started therapy about 3 months prior to Mitch's death, which I probably saved my life. I started it because I was trying to understand Mitch and what he was going through, and he was trying to find himself. And you can imagine if he had 4 girlfriends and promised to marry 3, he was in a little bit of a pickle. So I was in therapy to try to understand that, as well as I'm a therapist myself, so I needed to have my own therapy to get my own issues out of the way. I felt that's really, really important. So I was in therapy with a wonderful man named Dr. Len Mahalik, who guided me through this grief process. Without him, I think because I was in therapy with him, the whole family was in therapy with him, in a sense. So we worked with the boys. Our friends loved on them and cared for them. And Jack and I, we'd have family meetings about what to do as a family. What kind of coffin were we going to have? What kind of service? How was it going to be? Everything we did as a family. That was just some sort of instinct. So that was really the beginning of all of this journey. I believe that Mitch's depression was masked, and we didn't get it. We didn't understand it. He was such a good actor. He could shine and be happy or pretend and be a good actor. And then I think on his own, he suffered from probably a clinical depression that we missed. So as time went on, a minister called me and asked me to lead a support group with him. In his church, he had a support group for parents of loss. And I said, "No, I'm not sure I'm even going to live yet. Come back some year. I can't do that." And he said, "I really need you. Please consider it." So I did. And I said, "Well, I'll try." So what it did was to help me more than anyone, probably. I was the director of a very well-known family counseling center in Atlanta, Georgia, called The Link Counseling Center. We saw individuals, couples, and families. And I was the director, so I felt like I had failed. I was a failure to myself, my center, my family, my son. The guilt, I think, was the hardest part for me. What had I done wrong? What had I not done? What should I have done differently? All of that. I think most people can relate to the guilt. Actually, I was feeling like more about me than about Mitch. I had failed him, and that's why he did this. That's not true. I did not fail him. I was the best mother I knew to be, and my husband was the best father we knew to be. So eventually I had to learn that. I had to remember that. And as I put myself back together while I was in therapy, I started this group with this minister, and it was wonderful. So as time went on, I started a support group of my own, just for survivors of suicide, because I think there's a difference when you lose someone to suicide than when you have another kind of death. So I started my own support group, all free of charge, at the Link Counseling Center. And again, I think it helped me more than it helped the people there. So I think what helped me the most was helping other people, was to forgive myself. That was major. To forgive myself for what I thought I had done or not done. And to really believe that, to work on that. I had to work on that in therapy. How do you forgive yourself when you think it's your fault? But that was grandiose. I like that word because I was grandiose about my part in his suicide. Of course, I'm his mother. I'm a part of it on some level. But someone said to me, "Was that your intention, that he end his life?" And I said, "Of course not. Why?" He said, "Then why are you so guilty? Why are you saying it's your fault?" I got that. That made sense to me. So that was the beginning, the turning point, I think, for me. That's what helped me the most. Helping other people and making meaning out of it. Someone said in a workshop I was doing one time later on, you have to tell your story about what happened so that you believe it. You tell your story and hear yourself speaking it. Second thing is to express all the emotions that you have: anger, rage, fury, guilt, shame, all of that. Another one is to transition from the physical presence of your connection to your loved one to another kind of relationship, maybe in dreams, maybe psychically, whatever your mode happens to be, to connect to that person, to transition. And the fourth thing is to make meaning out of what happened. I think the 3 books that I have now written have made meaning out of Mitch's death, so that he didn't die in vain. Something good came out of it, because nobody spoke about suicide in 1977. Nobody. My first book My Son, came out, I think, in 1983, and nobody was talking about it. But when they started reading that, and I shared our story, they could then say, well, okay, I relate to that. I get that. So those 4 things really, really helped me. And I guess as time went on, I started doing more support groups, and then I started doing speeches all around the country. And then I was asked to go to Europe and to South America and different places. So it changed my life. In a way, it changed it for the better. It gave meaning and purpose to my life. I did transition from his presence in our lives, which was very hard to relearn he's not here, and that I can have a connection spiritually with him, or not. That doesn't happen for everyone. But I believe that those are the things that helped me the most. And being able to talk and be vulnerable and not be ashamed. Shame is a big one. And back in the 70s, you were ashamed if somebody did it. You'd drive down the street, and I'd think, everybody now, that car passed me, they now know my son ended his life. It was irrational, but it was what was happening to me, until I finally forgave myself for what I had thought I had done or not done. So I guess one of the things that helps me is to help someone else to make meaning out of it. Write your own book. I encourage people to write their own story. Tell your story and make meaning out of it. Even if you only go to a neighbor who has a suicide and tell them that you will make it, you will survive. I have, you can. And I think that was a huge piece of it for me. Sometimes when you tell another person that they can survive, they won't believe you, but you're living proof. So you don't have to convince them. You can just say, give yourself time. It takes a long time, and it's like a roller coaster. You go up and then you go down. You go up and then you go down. So it's on and on and on. But I believe that the thing that can help you is making meaning out of it and forgiving yourself. I'm going to close with a poem that I read in a telephone booth as a child. I've always remembered it, and maybe I can remember it today, and if not, we'll see. And it goes like this. To live today as though it were my last, to spend it royally yet with reason, to live happily, love passionately, regret frequently, yet to kiss the place that felt the thorn because of the rose, to treat with all men and women openly, honestly, reservedly, and at the last, to keep myself in that frame of mind which enables one to lie down to his rest, conscious of no great evil done to his fellow man, and humbly grateful for the opportunity of having done some little good in this world. And so that is the way I will leave you today. I did want to share one more poem that everybody loves, and they always ask when I'm doing a speech, they always ask me to read the I Don't Know Why poem. So let me just share that with you. I don't know why. I'll never know why. I don't have to know why. I don't like it. I don't have to like it. What I do have to do is make a choice about my living. What I do want to do is accept it and go on living. The choice is mine. I can go on living, valuing every moment in a way I never did before, or I can be destroyed by it and in turn destroy others. I thought I was immortal, that my family and my children were also, and that tragedy happened only to others. But I now know that life is tenuous and valuable. So I am choosing to go on living, making the most of the time I have, valuing my family and friends in a way never possible. I'm so sorry you've had to experience a loss by suicide, but I'm here to tell you, you will survive. That's a choice. We have to survive to make meaning out of it, to help other people with their loss, and to give purpose and meaning to your life and to theirs. So thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you again later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Iris. I hope the Survivors Talk has been helpful to help you or a friend deal with the aftermath of losing a loved one to suicide. The journey's difficult, but it's a little less difficult if you do it with others. I want you to know that there are support groups for survivors in the Triangle area. If you or someone you know needs help, I encourage you to attend. There are 3 support groups, one in Raleigh, another in Wake Forest, and another in Chapel Hill. Thank you for watching the Survivors Talk. Take a moment sometime to give us your feedback about our presentation by texting 919-946-0112. And take care of yourself.